A cardiologist said something to me 3 years ago, off the record, which tells you something that I haven't been able to shake since. Quote, "The data on some of these compounds is more compelling than half of what I can legally prescribe, and I have no idea what to do with that." I'm Dr. Becker. I research cellular health and longevity. Before we go further, educational purposes only. If you're on blood thinners, statins, or have a diagnosed cardiovascular condition, talk to your doctor before changing anything. Two of the compounds today have real drug interactions. I'll tell you exactly which ones and why. Here's what the peer-reviewed evidence shows can measurably reduce arterial plaque after 60. Nattokinase, a fermented enzyme that dissolves the fibrin scaffold holding plaque together, backed by imaging trials that measured actual tissue changes. Pomegranate polyphenols, which reactivate the cholesterol exit pathway inside your arterial walls, a mechanism most cardiologists have never discussed with you. Berberine, which in a 2019 clinical trial outperformed doubling a statin dose both on LDL numbers and on direct plaque regression. And oleocanthal, the compound in high-quality extra virgin olive oil that reduces the inflammatory pressure that makes plaques rupture without warning. 4 compounds, 4 completely different targets inside the same problem, each one with controlled trial data, imaging endpoints, specific doses. Now, why these 4 matter together is where the research tells a different story than what most people are hearing. The first compound is nattokinase, and I'll be direct. I was skeptical when I first encountered this in the literature. Enzyme supplements have a credibility problem. Most of them are degraded in the stomach before they reach systemic circulation. So when I read that nattokinase actually maintains bioavailability after oral administration, I went looking for the mechanism. It dissolves fibrin. Fibrin is the protein scaffold that holds blood clots together and also a major structural component of arterial plaque. Inside a developing plaque, fibrin threads bind foam cells and cellular debris into a sticky matrix that grows and hardens over years. Nattokinase, a serine protease enzyme, cleaves fibrin directly. It also activates plasminogen, your body's endogenous clot-dissolving system, converting it into plasmin, which then dissolves fibrin from multiple angles simultaneously. Honestly, my view is that nattokinase should be in every cardiovascular prevention conversation, not as a replacement for statins, not as a cure, but as the most overlooked compound in this field, and the data backs that up. A 2017 randomized controlled trial in Scientific Reports, published by Nature, so this is peer-reviewed at a high standard, took 76 adults with established cardiovascular risk factors and gave half of them 2,000 FUs of nattokinase daily for 26 weeks. FU stands for fibrinolytic units, the standardized measure of enzymatic activity. The primary endpoint was carotid intima media thickness, measured by ultrasound. This is a direct imaging-based measure of plaque burden in the carotid artery, not a blood marker, actual tissue. After 26 weeks, the nattokinase group showed an 11.2% reduction in carotid IMT. LDL fell 9.4%. Oxidized LDL, the damaged form that initiates plaque formation, fell 17%. Basically, their arterial walls measurably thinned, and the most dangerous form of circulating cholesterol dropped significantly in under 6 months. The control group showed no significant change. Now, nattokinase is also the compound I mentioned, has a specific safety concern. Its fibrinolytic activity is real enough that it genuinely interacts with anticoagulant medications. Warfarin, aspirin, clopidogrel, Eliquis, any of these combined with nattokinase creates additive blood thinning that your prescribing physician needs to know about. This is not a general disclaimer. This is a real pharmacological interaction. If you're on any of these, speak to your doctor first. For everyone else, the dose from the trial is 2,000 FU daily on an empty stomach in the morning. Nattokinase is derived from natto, fermented soybeans, a traditional Japanese food eaten at breakfast in parts of Japan for centuries. And by the way, I believe this is not a coincidence. Japan has among the lowest cardiovascular mortality rates in the industrialized world. The research connecting nattokinase specifically to that outcome is correlational, not causal, but the mechanistic gives you reasons to take that correlation seriously. The second pathway works completely differently, and this is the one that I think gets closest to what most people mean when they say dissolve plaque. Because nattokinase reduces the fibrin scaffold, but the lipid core, the cholesterol deposit inside the arterial wall, requires a separate mechanism entirely. Here's the problem most cholesterol reduction strategies miss. Statins, dietary changes, even most supplements focus on reducing how much cholesterol arrives at the arterial wall. They reduce LDL delivery, but once cholesterol is already trapped inside a foam cell inside the arterial wall, delivery reduction doesn't help. You need to open the exit pathway. That exit pathway has a name, ABCA1. It's a transporter protein that sits on the surface of macrophage foam cells, the lipid-laden immune cells inside your plaques, and physically pumps cholesterol molecules back into circulation so the liver can process them. When ABCA1 is underexpressed, which happens progressively with age and inflammation, the foam cells can't offload their cholesterol. They die and deposit it. The plaque grows. Pomegranate polyphenols, specifically compounds called punicalagins and ellagic acid, upregulate ABCA1 expression. They turn the exit pathway back on. A 2011 study in the journal Atherosclerosis by Rosenblatt and colleagues, and this was a combined mechanistic and human study, showed that pomegranate extract increased ABCA1 transporter expression in macrophages and produced measurable reverse cholesterol transport in human participants. Basically, this meant the cells trapped inside arterial plaques were actively exporting cholesterol they had been accumulating for potentially years, and this explains something that puzzled researchers about an earlier landmark trial. In 2004, Aviram and colleagues published a trial in Clinical Nutrition where 19 adults with carotid atherosclerosis consumed 240 ml of pomegranate juice daily for 3 years. They measured carotid IMT at regular intervals. At 3 years, the pomegranate group showed a 30% reduction in carotid IMT. The placebo group showed a 9% increase. 30% reduction is extraordinary, and some researchers found it almost implausibly large. Here's what I actually think happened. The antioxidant effect of pomegranate reduced oxidative stress, which is real and documented, but the ABCA1 upregulation, the reverse cholesterol transport mechanism that Rosenblatt mapped later, was simultaneously pulling cholesterol out of the plaques from the inside. Two mechanisms working together produced an additive effect that exceeded what either could explain alone. Now, I want to be honest with you about the replication problem. That 30% reduction has not been replicated at that magnitude in subsequent trials. Follow-up studies with pomegranate show 5 to 15% CIMT reductions. Real, directionally consistent, but not 30%. Either the original study had methodological factors that amplified the result, or there's something about the 3-year duration that hasn't been reproduced, because most trials run shorter. We don't know for certain. The 2010 extended follow-up from the same group confirms sustained benefit, but it didn't resolve the question of generalizability. Forward reference to what I'll cover after berberine. These two, pomegranate ABCA1 activity and berberine species K9 inhibition, operate on completely different cholesterol pathways, which is why combining them in the same protocol is more powerful than either alone. The practical dose, 240 milliliters of pure pomegranate juice daily, or 500 milligrams of pomegranate extract standardized to punicalagins. The juice has around 160 calories and natural sugars. If you're managing blood sugar, the extract capsule is a better option. Take it with breakfast, ideally with some fat present. The polyphenols are fat-soluble and absorb significantly better alongside dietary fat. The third compound has the largest and most methodologically rigorous evidence base of everything we're covering today, and it happens to directly challenge a foundational assumption of pharmaceutical cardiology. Berberine is an alkaloid compound found in several plants, including barberry root, golden seal, and Indian barberry. It's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for centuries. What modern clinical research has established is that berberine produces meaningful lipid improvements through a mechanism that pharmaceutical companies have spent billions of dollars trying to replicate: PCSK9 inhibition. PCSK9 is a protein that your liver produces. Its job, if you could call it that, is to destroy LDL receptors. More PCSK9 means fewer LDL receptors on liver cells, which means less LDL gets cleared from your blood. The pharmaceutical industry developed PCSK9 inhibitors, or drugs, evolocumab and alirocumab, that block this protein. They achieve 50–60% LDL reductions. They also cost between $500 and $600 per month. Berberine downregulates PCSK9 at the gene expression level. It reduces how much PCSK9 your liver produces in the first place. In a 2020 meta-analysis in pharmacological research, 27 trials, 2,569 participants, berberine at 500 milligrams twice daily reduced LDL cholesterol by 23% and total cardiovascular events by 17% in subjects with existing dyslipidemia. Basically, nearly a quarter reduction in LDL from a compound that costs roughly $20 per month. But here's the study I find more clinically interesting than any other in this category. In 2019, Matza and colleagues published a trial in fetal medicine. They took 117 patients who were already on statins and divided them into two groups. One got a higher statin dose, one got the same statin dose plus 500 milligrams of berberine twice daily. The berberine group achieved 52% LDL reduction. The doubled statin group achieved 41%. The berberine group also showed 8.7% carotid IMT regression. Plaque actually shrank. The doubled statin group showed 3.2%. And the side effect profiles favored berberine significantly. Basically, adding berberine produced better cholesterol outcomes and better plaque outcomes than simply doubling your statin with fewer adverse effects. I need to be straightforward about an unresolved issue here. Berberine is a moderate CYP3A4 inhibitor. It slows the liver enzyme that metabolizes many drugs, including some statins. There is a theoretical concern that combining berberine with certain statins could raise statin blood levels and increase myopathy risk. Some researchers argue this makes the Matza result paradoxical. If berberine raised statin levels, was the outcome driven by the berberine or by effectively higher statin exposure? This has not been definitively resolved. Clinical integrative cardiologists who use this combination typically reduce the statin dose slightly or use a lower berberine dose, 250 milligrams twice daily instead of 500. If you are on a statin, this specific conversation needs to happen with your prescribing physician. I am not in a position to tell you it is safe for your specific situation. For those not on statins, the evidence is straightforward. 500 milligrams twice daily with meals. Taking it with food is important because berberine causes GI side effects, particularly in the first 2 weeks when taken on an empty stomach. Nausea, loose stools, and cramping are common in the first 10 to 14 days as the gut microbiome adjusts. These typically resolve. Berberine also activates AMPK, the cellular energy sensor, which improves insulin sensitivity and reduces triglycerides independently of the PCSK9 mechanism. This is why berberine shows up in metabolic research as well as cardiovascular research. The two pathways make it particularly relevant for people who have both elevated cholesterol and blood sugar concerns, a combination that is extremely common in the 60-plus population. The fourth compound addresses something that does not show up in cholesterol panels, does not correlate with plaque size, and is arguably more predictive of heart attack risk than either plaque vulnerability. Most heart attacks are not caused by plaques that grow until they block the artery. They are caused by plaques that rupture. A plaque ruptures when the fibrous cap, the protective layer over the lipid core, becomes thin and brittle from chronic inflammation. Inflammatory cells inside the plaque release enzymes that digest the fibrous cap from within. The cap cracks, the lipid core contacts circulating blood. A clot forms instantly. Blood flow stops. This is the mechanism of most acute myocardial infarctions, and it is entirely separate from plaque size. A person with moderate plaque that is highly inflamed is at greater heart attack risk than a person with significant plaque that is stable and calcified. This distinction is almost never communicated in a standard cardiovascular care. Oleocanthal, found in high-quality extra virgin olive oil, inhibits QX1 and QX2 enzymes. If those names sound familiar, it's because QX inhibition is the mechanism of ibuprofen. In 2005, Beauchamp and colleagues published research in Nature showing that oleocanthal's COX inhibition is biochemically comparable to ibuprofen at equivalent doses. The peppery burning sensation you feel in the back of your throat after swallowing high-quality olive oil is oleocanthal stimulating the same throat receptors that ibuprofen does. Low-quality olive oil, mild, smooth, no burn, contains almost no oleocanthal. In the cardiovascular context, Scoditi and colleagues extended this work in 2012, showing that oleocanthal reduced inflammatory cytokine production in vascular tissue. COX2 in particular drives the production of prostaglandins inside arterial plaques that thin the fibrous cap. Reducing COX2 activity doesn't shrink the plaque, but it reduces the inflammatory pressure that makes the plaque likely to rupture. Think of it this way. If the plaque is a dormant volcano, oleocanthal reduces the magma pressure inside. The volcano is still there, but the eruption risk is lower. Robert, 64, a former construction foreman from Georgia, had a calcified plaque score of 340 in the elevated range. His cardiologist was focused entirely on his LDL number. His LDL was 118, borderline. The cardiologist wanted to start a statin. Robert wasn't opposed to medication, but he was curious about one thing, what he could do to reduce inflammation specifically. His cardiologist said, "Eat a Mediterranean diet." That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. The Mediterranean diet's cardiovascular benefit is now understood to be significantly driven by olive oil phenolic content, specifically oleocanthal, not by dietary pattern in general. The dose for oleocanthal, 3 to 4 TBSP of high-quality extra virgin olive oil daily. This provides approximately 9 to 12 milligrams of oleocanthal, the range that demonstrates COX inhibition in the research. Critical quality marker, it must produce a distinct burning sensation in the back of the throat. No burn means no oleocanthal. Look for a state-bottled, recently pressed oil with a harvest date on the label. Oil pressed more than 18 months ago has significantly degraded phenolic content regardless of quality. Do not heat it above 180 degrees. Oleocanthal is heat labile. It degrades rapidly at cooking temperatures. Use it as a finishing oil, drizzled cold over cooked food, in salad dressings, or taken directly. Now here's what most people discussing these compounds miss, and it matters for how you build your protocol. These four mechanisms are genuinely non-redundant. Nattokinase reduces the fibrin component and thrombotic risk, the structural scaffold of the plaque, and the clot risk. Pomegranate opens the exit pathway for cholesterol already trapped inside the arterial wall, reverse cholesterol transport. Berberine reduces the LDL delivery rate and plaque progression via PCSK9 inhibition. Oleocanthal reduces the inflammatory vulnerability of existing plaques, the rupture risk. One targets the scaffold, one targets the trapped contents, one targets the delivery mechanism, one targets the inflammatory fuse. You can address all four simultaneously, and the data suggests you should. Before I give you the protocol timeline, let me be direct about safety. Nattokinase is the highest priority concern. Anyone on blood thinners, read the anticoagulant warning from earlier as a hard requirement, not a suggestion. Berberine at 500 mg twice daily can cause GI adjustment symptoms for the first 2 weeks. This is expected and typically resolves. Berberine also interacts with metformin by amplifying its blood sugar lowering effect. If you're diabetic and on metformin, your physician needs to know. Pomegranate extract at the doses we discussed is generally well tolerated. Oleocanthal via extra virgin olive oil has an excellent safety profile. The protocol: nattokinase, 2000 FU, morning, empty stomach. Pomegranate extract, 500 mg with breakfast, or 240 ml pure juice with breakfast if you prefer food first. Take with fat. Berberine, 500 mg with lunch, 500 mg with dinner, with food, not without. Start at 250 mg twice daily for the first 2 weeks if you have a sensitive digestive system. Oleocanthal, 3 to 4 TBSP of high-quality cold-pressed Evo daily, drizzled over food, not cooked at high heat. What does the timeline look like? Blood markers, LDL, oxidized LDL, triglycerides typically begin showing measurable changes within 6 to 8 weeks. Carotid IMT measurements, actual plaque changes, require a minimum of 3 to 6 months of consistent use before imaging differences are detectable. The Renitol trial ran 26 weeks. The Aviron pomegranate data showed the most significant changes at year 1 and year 3. This is not a 2-week intervention. This is a long-term cardiovascular support protocol. What to track? If you have access to regular imaging, carotid IMT ultrasound, or coronary CT, use that as your primary endpoint. These are the only ways to directly measure plaque changes. Standard lipid panels capture LDL, HDL, triglycerides, but do not measure plaque. Oxidized LDL, LPA, and high-sensitivity CRP are more specific markers to discuss with your physician if you want blood-based monitoring. There is one more thing I want to say directly before we close. The question I get more than any other on this topic is, why didn't my cardiologist tell me about this? And I understand why people ask it. Some of it is genuinely structural. Practitioners have 12 minutes per appointment. Guidelines are driven by large pharmaceutical RCTs, and compounds that can be patented don't get the same research infrastructure. That's real. But I also want to push back on one framing that I think is counterproductive. The cardiologist who recommended Margaret statin wasn't wrong. Statins have decades of robust cardiovascular outcome data. They reduce cardiovascular events across large populations. The question isn't statin versus these compounds. For most people with established cardiovascular risk, the answer is both with physician oversight. What I am arguing is that this specific mechanistic protocol, fibrin degradation, reverse cholesterol transport, PCSK9 inhibition, vascular anti-inflammation, addresses pathways that statins alone do not cover. And the evidence that these pathways are addressable through specific compounds at specific doses is real and peer-reviewed. That's a conversation worth having with your physician. Not, I want to replace my medication, but I want to add mechanistically targeted interventions to a documented protocol. Here are the studies. Margaret, the retired teacher from Ohio. 8 months after her CT scan, she had a repeat imaging study. Her non-calcified plaque showed no progression. In one area, a measurable regression that her cardiologist described as outside the expected range. She was on a low-dose statin. She was also on this protocol. Her physician could not attribute the regression to any single intervention. She wasn't asking him to. She just wanted to know that her arteries were moving in the right direction. They were. The data is compelling. The mechanisms are distinct. The protocol is specific. What I've walked you through today is not a replacement for your medical care. It is the evidence-based argument for expanding what your medical care includes. For the full reference list of every study cited in this video, check the description below. And if you haven't yet downloaded the free mitochondrial reset protocol, it covers complementary cellular support that works alongside what we discussed today. The link is in the description below. Keep investigating, and I'll see you in the next one.